Hello. Um, Today I was just going to read a letter that I wrote on the 15th of this month. So that would be what? How many days ago? I don't know if I need this darn thing in here. Um, I wrote it to Ted Cruz because I heard a lot of right wing people bashing China, so I was wondering about that. And I'll get to why I was wondering a lot about it after I read the letter. Talk more about that. Okay, so this was written um, June, July 16th, or was that May? I can't tell by this. Anyway, dear Ted Cruz is running for Senate, Houston, Texas. Dear Ted, I love the way you have stood up for President Trump. That's why I donated to your re-election campaign. After hearing your anti-China rhetoric, it gives me pause to consider your abandonment of him. I have questions about China and would like to hear about it from your perspective and be able to ask questions, but that seems impossible. I am perplexed about China bashing by certain right-wing talking heads. Alex Jones was the first to do it by calling them Chi-coms, coining the term Chi-coms. It was soon after that mainstream social media internet cut him off by the ankles. What's the connection? Is there one? Perhaps Jones threatened China's go-between position for COVID-19. It's hard for me to see China as the aggressor when it's the U.S. military that's camped all over on and around the mainland of China and even seeks to control the South China Seas. It's not China camped around and on the North American continent. I do not support globalist takeover of USA sovereignty, nor do I support the US military bullying other countries on behalf of private interests, like mining of minerals in Afghanistan. The negotiating style of President Trump is much more effective while promoting peace instead of war. The constant China bashing done by right wing speakers is counterproductive to President Trump's negotiations. When Biden was vice president to Obama, he extorted China, and China paid $80 billion to Hunter Biden with the promise they would get their money back with the U.S.-China sweetheart trade deals. This was bad for the USA, who let into the country all China's trade goods tariff-free. Yet when U.S. business trade goods entered China, they were expected to pay high tariffs, which made their goods much more expensive to sell in China. Trump ended this scam, not just with China, but with European countries as well. Hunter Biden should be made to pay back all the money he extorted from China in exchange for a complicit Obama-Biden trade deal. In other words, U.S. business paid Biden with China as a go-between. I suspect the same setup is happening with the COVID-19 pandemic. I saw a lot of videos to the effect that the COVID-19 virus was developed in USA university laboratories. Fossey then hired the Wuhan laboratory to continue research and experiments. China appears to be a go-between for what? We do know vested interest globalists fund many things and wish to destroy a sovereign United States government, and their mechanizations have endless potential allies or dupes for their huge supply of money. I suspect a setup to instigate war. For arms dealers? For whom? For what? Does China consent? Or are they go-between dupes? Government officials like Biden and many others should not be able to place their children in proxy positions to rip off other governments for U.S. government favors, like the most favored nation status. I have noticed the government powered elite do this at the state government level as well. Place their children at the head of government state departments, just like the old aristocracy did. This must stop and the U.S. government put back on track in line with our Constitution. The swamp is deep and wide with many tentacles. Furthermore, consider U.S. sovereignty. All other colonies of England are still tied to monarchy apron strings in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, 40 some total, and never fought for their freedom or independence like the United States successfully did. The recent TV series Game of Thrones played out their ineptitude. The U.S. was different because it was the Six Nations Confederacy of Iroquois that midwifed their birth, guiding, attending, and even leading their early meetings. This is entered into U.S. congressional records. This is what the United States had that the other colonies did not have. Sadly, succeeding administrations of the United States government have not acknowledged but sidelined Native Indian history and participation to their own peril. The U.S. and other colonies of England are brothers and related in history. The U.S. does not share history with China and has no right to interfere with their governmental evolution. The U.S. has more right to influence the Commonwealth and more need, since the Commonwealth is still tied to a monarchy, which is closer in nature to a central globalist ruler. There can be no compromise with aristocratic rule, no compromise with globalist elite rule. It must be rooted out wherever and however it shows itself, if the United States is to survive as an independent nation. I pray you reaffirm your support of President Trump and the United States Constitution. And that was the end of my letter. Um, Heart Warrior Chosa, Ojibwe Nation, USA citizen. Um, anyway, so some of the questions I have about China, it's very sad to see this crazy fighting going on, and I think it's being instigated actually from inside. Okay, back in what year was it that Nixon opened the doors to China with Mao Tse-tung. Mao Tse-tung was the leader then, and Nixon met him, and they opened their doors for the first time. But it took a while. I think it took till '78 before any real liaisons were set up between the two countries. And so back then, Biden was on the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate. And I imagine, because of his position on Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, that he was instrumental in how China viewed the United States. Biden, you can tell on his videos where he was bragging about extorting Ukraine to the Council on Foreign Relations. That's who he was bragging to. And the Council on Foreign Relations are made up of globalist interests. Anyway, so, and they play a big part. They've got their tentacles all over in our government. And they're a separate group that were never even elected or anything. So Biden felt perfectly safe to brag to them about his illegal activities in Ukraine and how he was extorting them through his son for money so they could be able to meet with the United States government and do trade deals and whatnot. Same thing back in '78 Biden must have done with China. So he poisoned China's mind about what kind of country the United States was. Oh, they're a bunch of thugs that will blackmail us so we can do business. That's the idea that he must have gave them. So I wouldn't lay everything on China's doorstep. they're only dealing with the people that they met initially. Now, a friend of mine happened to be on the Committee for Friends to China back in the 70s, early 70s. And they first came to Minneapolis for this big dinner. It was their first visit. And so my friend invited me to attend that, which I did. Now, at the time, I was doing a lot of hand reading analysis where you study nerve endings, bone structure, fingerprints. There's 7 different types of fingerprints. Each one of them have a meaning. And so I was doing a scientific analysis of hands at the time. And I had done a lot of white people's hands. I had done a lot of Native Indian people's hands. I had done a lot of half breed hands. And now I got a chance to do a lot of Chinese hands. So I read a lot of Chinese hands at this dinner. Okay, so it was a very nice dinner. Everybody was sitting at their own table, and I could see that when the Chinese initially came in, all the Americans were set at different tables, and then the Chinese came in as a group. And the thing that I noticed that was so blatant to me is that the Chinese came in as one mind, whereas the United States citizens were all individual minds. They didn't have this group mind like the Chinese had. It's hard to explain if you're an individual mind, explain to you what it's like to be part of a group mind. It's kind of hard when your social awareness is different. But I could see this because Native culture comes from group mind, but now we've been forced to have individual minds. So that's why I can see the both of them. Anyway, so I noticed this. The Chinese, now this was another thing that was extremely fascinating. The last time the Chinese saw any Americans or pictures of Americans were from the 1920s. So the Chinese came in, the men were all dressed in cardigan sweaters and those baggy pants that men in the 1920s wore, and the women came in with zoot suits. Zoot suits were what 20s men wore with ties, a zoot suit, and they all had their hair cut short in a kind of like bangs and then short around like this. All the women had their hair cut like that, and they all had zoot suits on. And the men came in with casual wear, with a casual cardigan sweater and slacks. And that's how they were dressed. And all the men were dressed that way, and all the women were dressed the other way. And it was really different to see that. But they were trying to be in style with the last time they saw any pictures of Americans so that Americans would feel more comfortable with them. And then, yeah, and then also Mao Tse-tung freed women during the revolution. He stopped women from binding their feet. He made it against the law for women to cripple their feet up anymore because aristocratical women bound their feet or had their feet bound from childhood so their feet didn't grow. And they kept little tiny feet. And uh, then women were freed up to do anything and be anything, be in the military, become doctors, do anything. So he kind of really freed women, Mao Tse-tung. One of the changes that he made in China that was good. Gave women their freedom, recognized them as equal individuals. Anyway, so I found that very interesting. And the Chinese were open, they were trying to be friendly, and so I can't imagine what they thought with Biden was one of the people that they met and had to deal with because he's given to extortion. Okay, you can get these good deals, but you need to pay my son or you need to put this money away for me in order for me to get you this deal. And that's what he did. He bragged about it. And he poisoned China's idea of what the United States was like. So I wouldn't, and for that reason, I wouldn't be bashing China and blaming them for everything. They were set up by people from here, people who are working for globalists, or people who are only have self-interest. They don't have the interests of their country at heart, of their citizens at heart. They only have their own self at heart, where they can make money, or they're working for the globalists and taking a lot of money from them. It was even a video of Biden bragging to about how, yeah, sure, when he first got in, he was offered all this money from the Council on Foreign Relations. Naturally, he was going to take it, he said. So he was unabashedly taking money. Citizens and citizen rights were never his concern. And so I wish people would pay attention to what's going on. Now, I want to do further investigations because Hong Kong is another matter than China, although they're connected. Now, they're always saying they've been trying to invade China since Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth sent people over there to try to spread opium around in China so they could take it over. And that's why the Chinese helped build the railroad here. They built half the railroad across the country. They lost 230 tons of Chinese bones were shipped back to China after the railroad was built. That's how many Chinese people died. And I don't know how many Irish. The Irish built the other side. How many of them died building that railroad? A lot of blood went into that. And so 230 tons of bones were shipped back to China after the railroad was built. And the Chinese were able to get train technology, so they built a train across China so that they could move troops rapidly, so that they could keep the English out. The English were trying to take over their country. Well, naturally, they didn't want them to take over. Who would? You know what I mean? They got their own country. Why they need more than anybody else, I don't know. And another thing I'd like you to look at is Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, New Zealanders, Australian Aboriginals. These were all peaceful people who did not have a ruling elite. And because they were trusting and open, they were taken advantage of and they got taken over. They weren't able to take over other countries that also had ruling elites like China. Anyway, I got to get out of here. It started to rain. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye bye.